Confession. While on the denial of the value of the Eucharist by the Cathars there are no doubts, on the degree concerning the sacrament of confession or penance there are different opinions. Private confession, as practiced by the Catholics, doesn't seem to have been foreseen. Sacconi speaks about it, but there are no other confirmations. From existing documents, it seems that the Cathars practiced a rite of confession, one which, however, had nothing to do with that of the Catholic, and was rather in many ways the exact opposite, given that the one confessing was the consolato, not the believer. This confession was called in Latin servicium or apparelamentum, and in Occitan apparelament or servici. It was a sort of monthly confession of venial sins committed by the prefect of a community to a member of the hierarchy, who in turn confessed in front of all. It dealt, therefore, with a public confession and emulated, like the practice of the early Church and as prescribed in the New Testament, confess your sins, therefore, one to the other. In all the sources it is underlined that believers do not need to confess themselves. The confession of the perfects happens coram omnibus et publici, meaning in front of believers, even though, as all gave witness, the consolati in general were without sin, and only confessed small shortcomings. There was no provision for penance, and in the case of sin, the consolamentum was invalidated. The inaccuracies and approximations that are found in texts to speak of Cathar confession are considerable, also because too often they give way to the temptation to apply Catholic categories to a rite that was something altogether different. The sentence, "the deacons have the power only to absolve venial sins, the bishops the mortal sins as well," contains, for example, a good 2 errors of this type. Page 146. In Catharism, absolution was never expected, and the presence of a priest as the mediator between the soul of the believer and God was unthinkable. The difference between venial sins and mortal sins is exclusively Catholic. The term venial arose in the 12th century, contemporary with the idea of purgatory, while Catharism ignored venial sin. When there is sin for a Cathar, it is always a mortal sin, because it meant the loss of freedom and the spirit. Baptism in it was immediately invalidated. In the comedy, the word confession occurs as a noun and a verb 11 times, 6 times holding the meaning of professing or revealing an idea, twice referring to Dante's confession, 3 times referring specifically to the confession of sins as provided by the Catholic Church, but in all, moreover, it assumes a sarcastic tone.